Hey, everybody, it's Brett, and we are back with another book discussion. And for those of you that are watching, you're going to see that I have a new partner in crime today.
Yay.
Charity, I'm here with my friend Charity Middleton. She and I have known each other for years. We went to church together. We were on the praise and worship team together.
We were.
So she's one of my little praise team buds.
Yes.
So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
So
Is this your
excited to be
first
here.
time on a podcast?
This is my first time on a podcast.
You are a podcast newbie.
I am.
Are your knees shaking
A little bit.
a little bit?
And some butterflies,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
good ones. It's exciting.
So what's nervous about? What makes you nervous about it? Just I know just doing something new.
Yeah, just doing something new. And knowing that it's like going to be out there on the internet for the world.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And Melanie and I found out real quick, anything stupid we say, it can be edited out. So
Good to know.
So that is good to know, because anybody that knows me, this girl right here is as sweet as Southern sweet tea.
You're precious. You're too kind.
Sometimes, occasionally, always, I'm a sassy pants. So sometimes I have to edit out several things.
We'll be a good balance for one another.
And that's what I said. Melanie and I are great balances for each other, because, and sometimes she'll be like,
She's like,
don't say that. Yeah. Are you sure you want to put that out there? So I think you're going to be a good balance for me, because
thank you.
I've never seen any sass in you. Maybe either it's hidden.
It is rare. I'm not the sassy one. That's one of the other four.
I suffer from foot and mouth syndrome quite frequently.
See, and I think I'm probably the opposite of I tend to stuff far more than I should.
Do you?
I'm a stuffer. And then when it does explode, it's like a huge explosion of months worth of stuff, which is not healthy either.
Exactly. Sometimes you just need to get it out. So what happens? What causes that to happen? Is it just?
Oh, typically it's overstimulation, just too many things all at once. And then my emotions just can't take it anymore. And I start crying, and my poor little 12-year-old son is like, Mom's losing her mind. Dad, it's happening again. What do we do?
Just ignore it, son.
Yeah. And he's like, just give her a hug. She'll be fine.
Exactly. Give her a hug. Tell her you love her. If there's a Snickers in here somewhere.
Yes. Hand her some chocolate. Back away slowly.
Exactly. Well, it's so funny, because for those of you who listen regularly, Melanie has mentioned her health issues.
Yes.
And she mentioned in the last episode that they found a spot on her liver, and so they're having to do sort of a more aggressive treatment on her, chemo treatment, than what she has had in the past. In the past, she's been able to do the podcast fine, even though she had good days and bad days.
Sure.
So I talked to her after the last episode, and I could tell, we did Redeeming Love last time, and I could tell by the end of the podcast she was really struggling. It was a lot for her. And so I called her afterwards, and I said, do you need to take a little bit of time away from the podcast? And she said, I hate to admit it, but I really think I do.
Yeah.
And this is so out of my comfort zone doing it without her, because we've grown into doing this podcast. We can kind of read each other.
You develop a rapport.
We've developed a rapport. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, do I put the podcast on pause, which I really didn't want to do, because I just enjoy it so much. And so I thought, okay, well,
your listeners enjoy it too.
Yeah. What I posted something on Facebook, like last month, we had listeners in 7 different countries.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So how people in Japan even find us, and I have no idea.
I love that though.
Those of you from Japan that are listening,
hi.
Whatever the version of hello is in Japanese.
Konnichiwa?
Is it konnichiwa?
I think.
Oh, okay. Well, konnichiwa.
I think we might look that up before we post it, but I think that's correct.
If we're wrong, let us know.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was like, the purpose of the podcast all along has been to do a deep dive into books. Not just we really wanted to talk about books that we have read and enjoyed.
Yes.
And also talk to authors about the books, but we didn't really want to do author interviews every time.
Right.
But we did want to bring some authors on. And so I thought, okay, so since Melanie may not be here, that I may start bringing on a few more authors just to sort of give me that, because I need someone to interact with.
Sure.
And so as I was thinking, Jessica, who did the last episode with us, the Redeeming Love, I thought, well, we can use her. She said she would be willing. And for some reason, Charity Middleton popped into my mind.
I'm so glad that I did.
Yeah. And so I was just, and I don't know why, because we've never really talked about books. Maybe we did at one point. And
maybe we'd had a few discussions at church, before practices or something.
Yeah.
And then I do always try, because I'm friends with you, and then my friend Jack, she's an author. And so I do try to share things for her, just promoting. And I try to always be conscious when you're posting on your author page to share those things, because I want to see my local friends succeed in their endeavors, whatever they are.
Yeah.
But because I am a reader and I love to read, I always want to encourage reading in other people. So,
and authors appreciate that, especially unknown authors like us. It's hard.
That grassroots makes a difference.
It really does, and it's hard. A lot of readers, and I totally get why, it's really hard to get your start as a writer, because people like what they know.
Right.
They like the authors that they know. And so, I'm not as bad about it. I'm a more eclectic reader, because
me too.
As an author, I know how important it is,
Sure.
So
who is your favorite author?
Oh my goodness. It varies from week to week.
Yeah.
But one of my all-time favorites is actually not a Christian fiction author.
Okay.
It's Mary Higgins Clark.
I love Mary Higgins Clark.
Yeah,
and I've read several of
every one of her books.
You have
hardback.
all of them.
Yeah, or pretty much. Yeah,
that's awesome. Bert.
Even her very first one.
I missed that when I came in. I didn't even look at your library.
Yeah. So Mary Higgins Clark is one of my favorites, and
she's amazing.
She is.
She's amazing. I think she's far ahead of her time in how she was writing, when she was writing
female
protagonists. Yes.
Yeah. So
I love her stuff. I started reading her in junior high.
Me too. She was my first adult author that I ever read.
Was she?
Growing up, and I do want to talk with this about you. I grew up, of course, reading, Nancy Drew and the Boxcar Kids,
Hardy Boys.
And yes, the Hardy Boys. And so, Mary Higgins Clark was the first. And I remember the very first time I picked up one of her books. But you remember back in the day when they used to have book fairs?
Oh, yeah.
At the school?
Oh, no, yeah. Book fair was like my jam.
Mine too. Do they still do that?
Yes, they do.
Oh, good.
I'm
glad that.
They're homeschooled now, so they miss that. They miss the book fair. But I finally just told them the other day, I was like, you know what? If I have to create my own somehow, I'm going to find a way to get y'all to a book fair again. And I just told Cody, I was like, I might just buy them each a Books A Million gift card. They've never been in a Books A Million.
Really?
No, because I know them. They're like me. We're going to go in there and we're going to come out spending a lot of money.
We're not in that tax bracket.
No, we are not.
Yeah.
So, but I thought if I gave them a gift card with so much money and just said, "This is your book fair."
Now, do you think the local school, when they had one, would they let them?
Probably. I think I probably could.
Now.
Yes, we are homeschooling. And so I think most of the local districts are super kind. And even in a lot of the districts, when you're homeschooling, your kids can still participate in district sport events.
Oh, okay.
Depending on the rules of each district, obviously. And some homeschool parents are leery of that, this is kind of a whole other discussion. But sometimes districts require you to test your children with one of their students before they'll allow them to play in district events, to be sure that they have eligibility requirements, for their students.
Yeah.
They have to be making certain grades in order to play and all of that. And a lot of homeschool parents don't want to do that, because the whole point of homeschooling for many of us is we don't want them subject
to cut those ties to public schools.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of one of those, you have to weigh it out, what's best for you. Yeah. But I think the book fair would not be an issue. But I loved the book fair growing up, when they would send those
that was one of my favorites.
Tissue paper thin catalogs.
Yes.
And I would go in there with my pencil and my pen. And I know my mom just dreaded it every time, because I was going to ask for everything in it.
Yeah.
All the things.
See that box right there, the book under it?
Yes.
Grab that.
Oh.
I bought that at a book fair.
Did you really? Oh,
yes. Sure. That's one of the oldest books I have. It's a Nancy Drew book. It's a hardback.
Hold it up.
Yeah.
Look how pretty it is.
It's a Nancy Drew book. It's the Mysterious Mannequin.
I love books like this.
Yeah.
That have history in them. And that you can see the pages.
I even wrote.
Oh, ninth grade.
And look at
you paid $2.95.
$2.95. Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So this is I bought that at a book fair.
I love that.
School. Yeah. And so Mary Higgins Clark was my first adult book that I remember reading, and I bought it at a book fair. I bought one of her books, and I don't remember which one it was, but yeah. So she's one of my favorites. Robin Cook, I really like. Have you read any of his medical thriller? And I like Mary Higgins Clark because even though she's secular books, and we talk about mostly Christian fiction on this, but we also talk about clean fiction because I think there's value in reading secular and
And I'll tell you, I don't. In fact, most of the time, I don't necessarily read faith-based novels.
Me either.
I enjoy
I've gotten
them.
more into it.
Yes,
but yeah,
I feel like there's more authors writing good ones now.
There are.
I mean, just real talk. I feel like for a long time there were not great. Faith-based options.
Yeah,
they were very cheesy, very tropey.
Yes.
And not something I was super interested in reading.
Yeah.
Now, on the other side of that, there was also a lot of. Am I allowed to say the word smut on the podcast?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
There was a lot of smut.
Yeah.
And I don't want to read that.
No, don't want to read that. Don't want no part of that.
So it can be difficult. It can be challenging. I kind of even now tend to gravitate towards a lot of young adult YA novels.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy those because you still get a little bit of romance, which I'm a romantic at heart. I love a good little love story.
Yeah.
But I also like mystery. I love a good thriller.
Me too. That's my favorite genre.
The thrillers.
Mm-hmm.
My grandpa actually has turned me onto an author that I've just started reading, and it's a thriller type, and it's secular. It's a J.A. Jance.
Yes.
I'm reading one of those.
Okay. Yeah.
Whoa. It's kind of a mind trip.
I'm trying to remember. There's a J.A. Jance and there's a John J. Jance. I can't remember. There's one book. One of them wrote. It's called Pandora's Box.
Okay. Yeah.
I love that book.
I haven't read that, but I will.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah. And it's old. I read it when I was younger,
and it's good.
Yeah. In fact, have you heard of BookBub?
Yeah.
It's a discount ebook because I read a lot in ebook. And I ran across that book in one of their, and I got it for like $1.99 or something. And so I bought it because I wanted to read it again at some point. So yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to read that.
Yeah.
So I've got that one. This is a shameful thing, but I have had that book. I borrowed it from my poppy like a year and a half ago, and we kind of discussed earlier. Like I'm homeschooling my kids. I'm home with them a lot. I don't typically have a lot of time for myself to read.
Yeah.
But that's one of my New Year's goals is to get back into reading for me.
Yeah.
And so that poor little book, I'm about halfway through it, and it's just been sitting there on my nightstand, just sitting there waiting.
What is it?
Waiting for me.
What book is it?
I can even see it in my head, and I should know this, but I cannot tell you.
Okay, that's all right. I couldn't tell you half the time. It took me 3/4 of getting through the book we're doing today before I could remember the author's name and the title of the book. So
that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
It's a silver cover. I can see the cover and the writing's red. I just cannot see the words because I just get so focused on the story. I don't even pay attention to the title a lot of the times.
Yeah.
That's not how I choose books. I generally look at I flip over and read the back or open the inside dust cover.
Yeah.
And then that's how I'll decide if I want to read one or not.
Yeah. For me, it usually goes book cover. If I like the book cover, I'll read the description.
So you look at the covers.
Book covers are very instrumental in whether I'll choose, to read a book or not. Mm-hmm.
I pay no attention to them, truthfully. And when I buy a hardback book, I am that person. I do not keep dust covers. I hate dust covers.
Really?
Why am I that way?
I don't know. I love a good dust cover.
I think it's because I have kids, and the first thing they do is take them off.
Oh, okay.
And tear them up. And so I'm just like, I don't even want to mess with that. And I get I'm protective of my books.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want sticky little fingerprints and things all over them.
Yeah. And I'm very particular about who I'll even loan them to because they tend to not make it back to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't do a whole lot of book loaning. If I particularly love a book and I want to share it with people, I'll just order paperback copies that I can hand out.
Yeah.
So
definitely not my hardbacks. And I've gotten to where I used to would only read hardbacks. But I've gotten now, of course, you only have so much space in a house, and I only buy hardbacks in my very favorite authors now.
Favorites.
Yeah. I've only been reading Christian fiction for probably a couple years now.
So I heard you discuss that with Melanie a little bit on a previous podcast.
Yeah.
And that kind of surprised me. I was a little surprised by that.
Yeah.
So who are some of your authors that you're liking in that genre right now?
Well, One reason why in the past I haven't really gotten into Christian fiction, it's because it's usually either Amish fiction or cowboy fiction, neither of which really
resonate with you.
really don't resonate with me. And it's hard to find a Christian fiction book that doesn't deal with romance. And I'm not into romance.
There's
I'm
a whole lot of romance.
Why can't there be more Christian fiction books that don't? I don't like all the smoochy, and a lot of times they all have the same, oh, I'm in love with him, but he doesn't like me. And then, and then he's in love with her, but he thinks it's just, and I get there has to be tension of some sort, but I've learned that I really like Francine Rivers.
I love her. I love her. And I love Redeeming Love. That's probably top of my list of her books, but I have read many of hers. And the first books of hers I actually read in junior high was the Mark of the Lion series. Have you read those yet?
Okay, the first book I read by Francine Rivers was last year, and it was The Masterpiece.
Oh, I love The Masterpiece too.
Before that, that was a good book. Before I read that one, I started reading, is it A Voice in the Wind? Is that the first one?
That's the first one.
I started reading it, and I didn't finish it. I only got I only got like a chapter in. I didn't even finish the first chapter, I don't think.
Now, I will tell you, it's a slow go.
Okay.
And then that whole series is kind of a slow burn. But it's kind of... Do you watch The Chosen?
I've watched a couple episodes. Yeah, I have.
How do you feel about that? Just high level.
It was okay, but again, I'm not really much into historical fiction,
so that's definitely what that is.
And I probably need to get more into it to get really invested. I don't think I've watched enough to really feel invested in it yet.
So that makes sense to me then, that would be why you didn't finish A Voice in the Wind.
Yeah.
It's very much a historical fiction but she's using characters. She'll pull from biblical characters and things.
Yes.
And it really deals, it's a lot with like the Colosseum and Rome at the time. And I mean, some of it is very heavy, very dark themes as you progress through that series.
And Francine Rivers, Redeeming Love had some themes. Very heavy things. And that's why I like her.
Yeah.
She's
not afraid to go there.
No. And that, I think it's what I like about her, because she's, again, I like saccharine sweet, puppy dogs and glitter, but
but that's not real life.
It's not real life, and those books are good to fill in after you've read something heavy and you just need something light that you can just, but I think now that I've read a couple of her books, and I loved Redeeming Love. I didn't think I was going to like it. I really didn't.
Yeah.
And I think now that I've read a couple of her books, and I've learned, and this is really weird. I don't know if this is weird or not. I'm not a fan of historical fiction, but I have learned that I love biblical fiction.
So, A Voice in the Wind, all of that, rest of that series, that is what that is.
Okay.
I would classify that. I mean, yes, it's historical, but it is also very much Bible-based. And it deals with a lot of the early church, like how it came to be, and different people's perspectives of Christ or their kind of tangential encounters with him. And so I think you should maybe revisit that at some point.
I think I will, because have you read any of Angela Hunt's books?
Yes, it's been a while and I can't remember which one. I've only read one.
My very first biblical fiction book was one of hers, and it was called The Woman from Lydia. I've got a paperback.
That might be the one I've read.
Is it? Okay. It was, the you remember the lady in
the purple merch?
She was. Merchant. Yes, she was. She was called the woman. The Seller of Purple.
Yes, the Seller of Purple.
That's what the Bible calls her.
Yes.
There's not very much about her in the Bible. So that was the very first biblical fiction, and I fell in love with it. Okay. So I went to the second book in that and loved it. And the third one in that series. And we had her
and for someone who's like not a series guy.
I know. Yeah. And that's what surprised me, and I've already pre-ordered the book. The third book in that series comes out. Yeah. It's called The Daughters from Rome. And we had her on the podcast.
I haven't made it to that one yet.
Okay.
I'll have to go listen.
Yeah. You'll have to listen to it. We had technical issues. So on that one, she's a New York Times bestselling author. And I told Melanie before she was the very first person we had remoted in.
Yeah.
And so we had horrible
Technology.
Yeah.
You love it and you hate it.
Yeah. And so like when you watch it, like on the audio, you can't really tell, but like on the YouTube version,
you can see it.
We couldn't even use any of the video.
Ugh.
Melanie and I had to go in and re-record our whole entire side of the conversation, and then we had to splice it in with hers.
Oh my goodness.
Girl, if I was ever tempted to curse,
stressed.
that
So
was
much
the time.
stress.
It was. I'm like, I really cut my teeth on editing on that one.
I bet.
Yeah, so but I was like, okay, we cannot let an interview with Angela Hunt, because I really thought about, okay, we're just gonna have to, and she's a New York Times and she was so gracious about it, know. And I was like, we cannot go to her and ask her to re-record the podcast, because So I was like, I really wish I hadn't let her be our first, that lesson learned, and we've learned how to do it now. But yeah, so I think now that I have learned that I like biblical fiction, I might have a different perspective going into that Mark of the Line series.
I think you would. It's good. It's well worth it. And I will say it's again it's not one of those happy feel goods all the time.
And I'm totally fine with that.
And then she also, Francine Rivers, I don't know if you've ventured in, not all of her stuff is historical.
Mm-hmm.
The Scarlet Thread, have you?
I haven't yet. Yeah.
Listen, now you will understand when you read it why I feel about that book the way that I feel about it, because of my personal history and background. It focuses on a pastor and his wife and some of their marital things that go on.
Okay.
And let me tell you what, I had a lot of moments when I read that book. I read it early in my marriage, and I can remember sitting in my living room and just sobbing and having to lay it down, because it just brought up so many emotions of things that I had kind of watched my dad walk through.
Yeah.
And so it was a very heavy. So Francine Rivers remains one of my top Christian fiction authors, because she will tackle real life.
Yeah.
And we need authors to do that. I think authors are so instrumental in helping us navigate our emotions with different situations.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you read something that it's like, that's what I've been feeling, and I just didn't know how to say it.
Yes.
So I really appreciate that authors give us a voice when we can't necessarily, maybe we don't have the voice ourselves.
Yeah. And then when they say it, you're like,
yes. An aha moments of like, whoa, this is what that is.
Yeah. I couldn't verbalize it like that, but yeah. So
yes.
I love that I have given Christian fiction more of a chance, because I do agree with you. I think there was a time when Christian fiction, there were always great Christian fiction writers like Francine Rivers, Karen Kingsbury,
Jeanette Oakey. Is that how you say it?
Well, I don't. Melanie and I've had this. I don't know if I always pronounce it Oak.
I always said Oak.
It Oakey.
I always said Oak.
Yeah.
She was probably my first.
I need to read some of hers.
Christian series authors. They're all pretty much historical based. A lot of them are set like in Canada.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but many of them are. But I will tell you, I think I've read almost everything she ever wrote.
Really?
With the exception of some of her collaborations. I didn't love those as well. But like,
do they have a different tone to them?
They do.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's the influence of the other authors that she was collaborating with, or or if it was just I was young, and very idealistic when I was reading them, and I don't know if I got a little bit jaded.
Yeah.
I got a little older. Yes, that's sweet, but she too kept it pretty real, and I think from the perspective she's writing from, a lot of those, a lot of them are set like in pioneer times of like going west and things like that. I always enjoyed her stuff, and I will, like, when my daughter is of an age that she's interested in things like that, I'll totally recommend those to her. I've kept many of her books that I bought over the years and still have, and so I enjoy those, but they're definitely more romancy based. But recently I started reading a lady named Tracy Peterson.
I've heard of her. I haven't read any yet.
She's kind of more like historical, but there's also some adventure in hers, like big snowstorms and crazy things like that might come up. And it's not all saccharine sweet.
Oh, okay.
I kind of appreciate.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I look for in books. I I like books that don't really delve as much into romance.
Yeah.
I like family dynamics, and when it comes to writing my books, my first couple were more romance centric, but I really like delving into family dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, there's so much that happens within a family.
there is, yeah.
And even amongst other, I mean, I have 4 sisters, all younger than me, and my relationship with each one of them is completely different than the other.
Yeah.
And their relationships with one another. So it's like a giant spider web, right? Of all these things happening amongst and between people. And it's very interesting how that affects our day-to-day lives and our moods and our emotions and perspectives. And I enjoy those. So what else are you currently reading?
Well, right now I'm reading a book for the next podcast. And I couldn't tell you what the name of it is right now. It's a new author for me. I'm blanking.
That's okay. We'll come back to
it. And right now I'm the type that kind of will read a couple books at a time.
Yeah, I have a few. Go.
I have a podcast book that I'm usually reading, and then I have a my book
for you,
a book for me. Yeah, and the funny thing about the podcast is I love reading. I love doing the podcast. But the minute you start reading a book for the podcast, it becomes work.
And you read differently.
You read differently.
Yeah.
You have to pay more attention to things.
I absolutely read this differently.
Yeah.
But I was so thankful when we were talking about me coming and doing this with you that you kind of said, okay, here's some of the things we might discuss, because it did help me know how to read. And I think reading for pleasure is a very different thing than reading when you're going to dissect something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So yeah.
I get that.
Yeah. So it's, when we first started the podcast, I generally average, depending on how busy I am. I don't get to read as much as I did now that I'm an author as well.
Sure.
So, but I can generally get at least 4 books out of a month, sometimes 6.
Yeah.
And I learned real quick, even though I love the books that we're reading for the podcast, they feel like work. Because
in a sense, it kind of is.
Yeah, it kind of is. And it doesn't diminish my love for the book. We have read so many books on this podcast that I've absolutely loved. But yeah, it kind of...
Do you think you'll revisit some of those at a point for pleasure?
Maybe, yeah.
To see if maybe it hits differently?
I think I will. Yeah, because, and again, when you're reading for a podcast, you're looking for things that you can pull out and things that you can expand on and things that you can incorporate and create conversations around.
Sure.
Because on the podcast, we like to not only just talk about the book, we like to have a host chat, kind of like we're doing now, Yeah. And so, so at some point, I think I may. There's an author that we did earlier, Christine Dillon. She was one of my the first time to read her. Really enjoyed that book, and at some point I think I'm going to have her on. She's an Australian author.
Very cool.
Yeah, so I'm thinking we may read the second book in that one at some point, and then maybe have her on too, because I really enjoyed her books. Yeah, so
I love that.
So tell me, you've been reading for a long time.
Since first grade.
Same. What were some books? I promise we are going to get into the book we're discussing today. What are some books that sort of propelled you into reading?
So I told Brett before the podcast started, the first set of books my parents ever got me was The Little House on the Prairie, set by Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Same.
I had the little box set. I will never forget it. They had gingham covers. And I read those until they were paperbacks, until the covers literally fell off. And I cried and cried.
I wish I still had mine.
I carried mine into our marriage. Like, they were falling apart. And my husband was like, honey.
You're like, you don't understand.
And he does not. He is not a reader.
Do you still have them?
They're packed up in a box.
Okay.
I can't let go.
I know. I wish I still had mine. I don't know where they went.
I just cannot let go. There are my tears on those pages. Like, and I'm an emotional reader, so there were a few times in this book that we read today for the podcast that, like, I had to just take a moment, and I was choking up, and my kids are like, "Mom, you okay?" And I'm like, Just give me a minute, kids.
Mama needs to talk.
I get emotionally invested in these characters. But good writing, I think, should do that.
Good writing does that, yeah.
So Laura Ingalls Wilder was kind of the first one. Jeanette Oak, I read all of her stuff growing up. Read a lot of Mary Higgins Clark.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I got older, and kind of started getting exposed to more things, I've read a lot of. I like law procedurals. So John Grisham, I enjoy him.
Love John Grisham.
I really enjoy him. Right now, oddly enough, I never dreamed that I would be this person. I am reading Brandon Sanderson.
He's on my list. Haven't read him.
Okay. Prepare yourself for some major world building. I'm talking, which I love Tolkien. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I love C.S. Lewis. Like, I love everything that those two men wrote. And, they had like a book
I read
club.
my first C.S. Lewis book on this podcast.
Did you love it?
No.
You didn't love it?
No.
Which one did you read?
The Chronicles of Narnia.
You didn't. Oh, Brett.
I know. Melanie had the same.
You did not love it.
No.
Okay, then I'm going to warn you. Sanderson may not be for you.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because he's like next level world building. Although, I will say that there is some romance, like very small tinges of it. He is very much more focused on the current series I'm reading. He has several.
Okay.
But the series I'm currently reading is his Way of the Kings.
Okay.
Series.
Secular?
It is secular. Okay. Although I would say I question, it is not marketed as any kind of Christian fiction.
Okay.
It is marketed, I believe, as like high fantasy.
Okay.
It's out there. I would liken it to almost like a Game of Thrones type level of world building. But there's none of the like gore and yucky.
Yeah.
So there's that. Which I'll readily...
I'm going to check one of his out.
Yeah. And so I'm currently, I don't know if that one's I think Way of the Kings is actually a trilogy, but then he has written other smaller novellas along the way to go with it.
Oh, okay.
And Jack actually recommended him to me.
Oh, really?
That's how I got started. She's very much into fantasy and things like that.
Oh, okay.
And so that was one of her recommendations. And I started the first one. It's very like political intrigue, kings, knights, but it's not set in medieval times. It's this whole other world.
Okay.
So I'm working my way through the second one. I'm actually doing an audiobook for it. I'm doing it on Audible.
Oh, okay.
I'm very invested. There's a lot happening. Like, you have to be able to keep track of a lot of different storylines at once. It's super heavy. It deals with themes of like slavery and just murder. Like, it is intrigue. There's a whole lot of intrigue.
Okay.
So I'm really enjoying it. My kids hate it.
Really?
Because I listen to it in the car sometimes.
Yeah.
And they're just like, and God love them, I've started them on audiobooks, but for them, we do a lot of the Boxcar Children. Like, that's their thing right now. They're loving the Boxcar Children. Because it's a little mystery, but not a lot. And none of it's super scary or anything.
Maybe
like
Sanderson's just a little too advanced for them.
I think Sanderson is way out of their realm. And Barrett's like, the other day I was listening, and he's so patient with me. He's my 12-year-old. But he was like, we listened to a whole chapter, and I turned it off, and he was like, I don't know one thing that guy just said. It's like, it's okay, bud. It's kind of out there.
One of these days, maybe you'll get it. Yeah.
But I keep telling Cody, I'm like, he goes, why do you subject them to that? And I'm like, because I'm hoping to build a love for reading in them the way that I love it.
Yes.
Like, I would love nothing more than to pass that down to at least one of my children.
Yeah.
So far, not happening.
Not happening.
But I'm trying.
Well, but I feel like kids have so many more distractions today than we did back in our day. 100%. I can remember back in the day, Mom would literally get out of the house. And I would literally take a Laura Ingalls Wilder book outside and read on the front porch, because I was never one to, of course we did bike. Of course, that was back in the day when you could actually,
okay too.
You could bike around your neighborhood without, worrying about never being seen again.
Yeah.
As much.
100%.
We did have a horrible kidnapping in our area.
Yes.
But so I think that's always been a thing. But there's so many more distractions for kids these days. We didn't have the internet back then.
Yeah, my kids get in the car, and if they don't have which Barrett is turning 12 next week, and he's in the big youth group at our church now, Brett.
The big, I can't
like
believe
with
it.
Teenagers.
I literally remember him before he was even born.
I know. Yeah. Well, Belly was him in it.
Yeah.
And he's in the big youth group now, and he went on a retreat with the teenagers the first year. Like, he was gone for 3 days without me.
Did that kill you?
It really didn't, because we've done camp a few times.
Okay.
And so he did camp. So he's done that for a few years. So that kind of got our feet wet to being away from each other.
Yeah.
But this was the first time at our new church. And also, he would have been in like the junior high. They have them divided up by junior high and senior high.
Mm-hmm.
So at our new church, all of it's junior high and senior high together.
Oh, okay.
So he's with teenagers. He is the youngest kid in the youth group. But he wanted to go because he wanted to go make new friends.
Yeah.
And so, like, they are 3 hours away almost. And I told my husband, I was like, listen, I know we said on his birthday was when he was going to get his cell phone, but I can't have my baby 3 hours away from me and being the only kid at camp with no cell phone.
Yeah.
I need to be able to call him whenever I want for my own personal peace of mind. So we gave him his birthday present early. So now he has a phone. All that to say, so like when we get in the car, he's playing a game on his phone, Tetris or, something like that. Stella takes her little Switch and plays games.
Yeah.
And since we're homeschooled, they do all of their school on their computers. They each have their own laptops to do school on.
Yeah.
They have so much more
activities to choose from.
And stimulation technology.
Yeah.
Just technology.
And we just didn't have that. Yeah.
So for me,
and I think it's tragic because I can't imagine not enjoying picking up a book and reading it.
Listen, and my kids I take them to the library. That's one of the things that we do. It's a good activity to get us out of the house as homeschoolers.
Mm-hmm.
And they do enjoy it. They do like to go to the library and pick out books, but they certainly are not into them the way that I was. I mean, like, this is so funny. My sisters still give me grief about this. The one time that, like, I got super big in trouble, because I'm very much a first child rule follower, like, peacekeeper, non-confrontational.
Yeah.
And my dad.
I can totally see you. Yeah, I know your dad. Yeah.
And so, like, I lost it on my dad one day. I think I was like 15 or 16.
Really?
Living in the parsonage. And he was teasing me about something.
For those of you who don't know, she's a PK. She's a preacher's kid.
Yes. Yeah. So we're in the parsonage. He's in the kitchen. And I'll never forget it because I was getting something out of the pantry. And he was just mercilessly teasing me about something.
Your dad?
Yeah. Just
Oh, your dad's a kid. Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Totally.
And so he was like picking on me. And I don't know if I was just super emotional or what was going on. But I turned around and I screamed at him, Brett.
Wow. I can't see you doing that.
Never. But he just hit a nerve, I guess. And do you know his punishment for me? He took all the books out of my room for 2 weeks. I thought I was going to die, Brett. He would not let me read anything but my Bible for 2 weeks.
You know you're an avid reader when take the TV but leave my book.
He left the TV and took all the books out of my room for 2 weeks. And it was awful.
Not cool, Pastor Sean.
Mean. I'm probably scarred. I told
but
you I was
never did it again, did you?
I never did it again. Never. That'll be something I talk to my therapist about. Like,
let me tell you what my dad did years ago.
My dad took all my books away.
I've never gotten over it.
If it's the worst thing you ever did, I think we're pretty okay.
I think you're pretty okay. Yeah. So tell me a few of your, like, if you, and I know this is like asking who your favorite child is. You just can't do it.
No.
But if in this moment in time, like, what are some of your all-time favorite books? Now, next week when I ask you, it could be a totally different list. So, but tell me what your favorites are.
Top of the list is gonna be Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings series.
Never read them.
I love them. They are beautifully written. And the insight, like, I mean, just that, because it really is the whole theme of good versus evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so even though he doesn't ever put that it's like Christian or whatever, if you've done any research into his background, you know that he was a believer, you know that he had a very deep faith.
He and C.S. Lewis were actually friends.
They were very close friends. They had a little book club.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you should look
Okay.
into that. It's really
Oh,
interesting.
okay.
And so I think of them as like where Paul talks about iron sharpening iron.
Yeah.
That's kind of what they did for each other.
Yeah.
And they encouraged each other in the writing of their own books.
Yeah.
Of each
Choose
of their
your
books.
friends wisely.
That's right, because they will propel you to greatness if you choose good ones.
Exactly.
And they'll drag you really down.
They can drag you down
if
the
you
toilet.
don't.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's probably my all-time favorites. I can
Okay.
reread and reread and reread those and find new things every single time.
See, that's the mark of a great book.
Yeah.
No matter how many times you read it, it's almost like reading the Bible.
It is.
You know, and you hate to equate a man-made book with the Bible, but
they were
it's a good
written
book.
by men, inspired by God.
They were inspired by God. Yeah.
And so I think, especially for Christian authors, what you're writing should be inspired by the Lord.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and you and I are both worshipers, and so I feel the same way about people who write worship music.
Yeah.
I find myself really, really listening to songs now before I even start to include them on my playlists, or like,
Yes.
Holy Spirit, give me discernment.
Because sometimes bad lyrics can be covered by a catchy tune.
Bad theology.
Bad theology. Yeah.
Yeah. So I find myself really being careful about that in my music even now. It's kind of a little sidebar, but yeah. So Tolkien, he's probably top of the list for me. I go back to that. That's probably my comfort series.
Okay.
I guess
You're kind of your comfort.
kind of my comfort author.
Okay.
But I have reread almost every Jeanette Oat book I ever read several times.
Okay.
I loved her Love Comes Softly series. It was beautifully done.
I really need to read one of hers.
I think you would enjoy them. And there's lots of different, she has a bunch of different ones. Like, she's got one that's from the perspective of like an Indian princess.
Oh, okay. Now, doesn't she have a series, something to do with chocolate? Maybe I'm thinking of a different author. Like the titles in the book like have chocolate in the title. Anyway,
no, I don't know.
Okay, you would know.
That's not ringing any bells, but I'm gonna check.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that may be a different author.
And then I like Agatha Christie.
Would you believe I've never read one of her books either?
You've never read it?
I know. How can you love Mary Higgins Clark and not read Agatha Christie?
Because she's kind of the precursor.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't start reading her till probably high school. But I do really enjoy.
See, I'm not a fan of classic fiction.
Oh, see, now I love classic fiction.
See, I'm not a fan of classic fiction.
The longest, biggest book I ever read was Anna Karenina by Tolstoy. I love that book.
Really?
It's a lot. I actually did my senior research paper on Anna Karenina.
Oh.
And it's a heavy read. And I've attempted War and Peace like 3 times, but I have not made it all the way through that yet. It's just Dostoevsky is rough.
It's rough, yeah. You know, a book I tried to get into. You know, there are some books that are just cerebral, and you're like, smart people read them. Swan's Way. Is it Swan's Way?
Swan's Way.
Yes, Marcel Proust.
Okay. Oh, Proust.
Yeah.
No, never read him.
Okay, yeah.
I think maybe I just assumed I was not smart enough.
Okay, well, and that's part of why I wanted to read it, because I am not smart in any way.
Together.
Yeah, well,
we should challenge ourselves.
We should challenge ourselves. Yeah, and I went in and I was like, okay, I'm going to try it just to see what it was like, and I think I abandoned it after about 4. I mean,
it's rough.
Well, yes. I mean, long sentences.
So, okay,
major run-on sentences.
Tolstoy definitely is that.
Yeah.
And I have to be in a very specific frame of mind.
Yeah.
To read those. Like this.
I don't think that's the kind of book where you can just sit. I think you need to read it in chunks.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. Like the book we read today, the one we read for the thing, I was able to read that even still with my kids kind of around and, you know, doing the mom thing. I fit it into what I call the margins of my day.
Yeah.
Moments, slivers of time where I knew I could fit in 2 or 3 chapters and
Yeah,
knock it
and
out
that
pretty
was
good.
one thing I was going to ask you about. I'm glad you brought that up because I'm like, how does a mother of 3, a husband, a wife of a husband, how do you even fit time to read into all that? And you homeschool your kids, so it's not like you're sending them to school and you have
Right.
a huge chunk of time during
So
the day.
truthfully, I was a little nervous because I knew we were going to try and knock it out pretty quick because you got to keep things rolling for your podcast.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, I hope I can do this. But I had told you before that I was making time. This is one of my goals for the new year. Make time to read for myself again.
Yes.
Not just for homeschool or, things like that.
Yeah.
And so I really, really wanted to do it. And that was really just I was like, Lord, please help me make the time.
Yeah.
And so it was a conscious effort of like recognizing, but the Lord, I think, helped me do that. Recognize, okay, you have 15 minutes here while Barrett's completing this assessment. Take that time and
read
you can
a chapter. Yeah.
And Bellamy, she still naps in the afternoon. So I took her afternoon nap time and made that some reading time while Stella was at basketball practice. I'm normally just sitting there for an hour doing nothing. That was a great time to knock out.
Yeah.
Some reading pretty uninterrupted. So I love that because I think that will it will encourage me to keep going.
Yes. And I think reading is kind of one of those things where you have to develop a habit.
Yes.
You really do.
Yeah. But it very much felt like muscle memory to kind of get back into it. It's been so nice the last couple of weeks doing that because like I was that kid that my mom would come in my room at 3 a.m. and be like, you have to get up for school in 4 hours.
Yeah.
You need some sleep. Put the book down.
I can remember young hearing Mom from the other room, turn that light off and go to put that book down and go to sleep.
My mom was the same way. But I mean, I can remember devouring books at a level like in junior high and high school when you don't have any other responsibilities. I would read 6 to 7 books a week.
Oh, wow.
I was checking out massive amounts of books from the library. It was literally the only thing I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did.
Yeah.
And so I was reading a lot. And then, you get married and you start a job and you suddenly have all these adult responsibilities.
Priorities change. They shift. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. We're fixing to move into the book. So like, tell me, like, since this is your first podcast, tell me about the dynamics. Like, how did it feel reading? Like, did it feel different to you
to read for
like
a podcast?
It is different for me reading for a podcast. Tell me about that dynamic for you as a reader.
So I will say I did read it a little differently than just reading for pleasure. I definitely was trying to pay a little closer attention to things and make sure that I was going to be well prepared to discuss the book with you.
Yeah.
But I still did enjoy it. And I think maybe even it helped me read better in a way.
Okay. Yeah.
I feel like I paid closer attention. And so maybe some of that stuff sunk in a little deeper than it would have if I had just been kind of glancing through it just for fun.
Yeah.
Because I'm guilty of that sometimes.
Oh, me too.
Like, I read the chapter and I can sort of tell you what it's about, but I was also distracted. So
yeah.
And it wasn't, and maybe there wasn't anything crazy interesting in that chapter, so I just kind of skimmed it and went on.
Exactly. Yeah.
I hate to be that way, but I think all readers do that.
I do that too. Yeah.
So, I think it did definitely help me to read better. So I enjoyed that part of it. But I did also utilize a lot of things I was taught. Like in high school, I had a great AP English teacher in 10th grade. Shout out to Miss White.
Woohoo.
She was awesome. And she taught us one of the things we had to do in each novel we read, and we had to come to class prepared with this each week. Whatever chapters we read, we had to have at least 2 quotes, I think it was, from each chapter, something that stuck out to us in that chapter. And we would have to go around the class and share them and say why that struck us. And so teaching us to think critically and dissect things, which was great.
Which is great. It's a good teaching experience.
I still kind of read that way. And we talked about earlier whether or not we were book writer inners. I'm a book writer inner. I highlight, I underline. There's pink ink all in this book now. But I do find that then if I want to go back and reference something, I can quickly flip to it usually and find it.
Yeah.
And so I like that.
So you're an annotator.
I'm an annotator. Yeah. And
is that a word, annotator?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. So that was definitely a different dynamic, but it did help me, I think, read more intentionally.
Yes, and that's one thing I've learned in reading for a podcast. One thing I learned is it teaches you kind of how you are how you operate as a reader, because especially when I'm reading the books that I know we're going to focus on the podcast, sometimes I find myself. So have you ever been reading a book and you've read a whole chapter and realized if somebody said, "Tell me what you just read that chapter," it's like
you couldn't tell them
it's like your eyes are following the lines, but you're not taking anything in.
Yes.
And sometimes I have to go back and reread chapters because I realize, and when you don't have the podcast, you're going to have to talk about, sometimes you just.
I think it's muscle memory.
Yeah.
Right? And so like your body just knows this is what you're supposed to do, so you do it.
You just do it, yeah.
But then maybe the brain is not always engaged.
Yeah, sometimes your brain just doesn't chew on everything that you're reading. Yeah. So so that's one thing I've learned about podcast reading is that it forces you to really dig into the book and think about it critically.
I agree.
Yeah. So all right, so we're going to get into the book.
Thanks for joining us on the Bookish Introverts podcast, where together we explore the worlds within the pages. Until next time, stay bookish.